Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Grapplers Academy, first one of 2022. 105 PT, coached by Si. Make sure you hit that like button, drop us a comment, and make sure you're subscribed to make sure you don't miss any of our technique videos or new episodes of the podcast. How was your Christmas and New Year?
We were just talking about that we both purposely / unpurposely put on a decent amount of weight.
Yeah.
Which I personally don't care about, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I'm not forced. I notice recovery and my cardio goes to pot.
I've not noticed too much because I've not been rolling for a while because my back's been injured, but I think if I would have been rolling, that would have been more of a incentive to keep my cardio up. It's horrible, isn't it? The first time you get back on the mats after not really having rolled hard for a bit. I remember when we went up to Alicats for that open mat, and it was gi, and it was 6-minute rounds, and they had 40-minute rest in between, and that was probably the first time that I'd rolled properly since COVID and lockdown. And I was just fucking blowing out.
It's like they say, nothing really can replicate rolling cardio. Like no matter what you do, like you can help get the little baseline from doing cardio exercise, but nothing's going to replicate the scramble, the constant tension. It's bizarre.
Depends what sort of rounds you're having, doesn't it? Because like throughout the year, you know, if you just a normal training night, if you're having like, you know, you're rolling 3 or 4 times a week, but they're not like super intense. You can kind of trick yourself that, or I've certainly tricked myself into thinking that that's enough cardio.
Yeah.
And, you know, like kind of pushing yourself 70% enough. But it's not, is it? When you go for those hard rounds, it's something completely different.
Yeah.
And depending on what sort of time frame you used to train as well, it's like a good argument for training the match lengths that you're going to end up most likely competing in. Because if you just do like 3-minute rounds or something like that in the gym and you have a minute's rest, or maybe you sit out and you end up talking for ages in between rounds, and then you come to a tournament and it's a 10-minute match and you've not been training for it, you're fucked.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends whether you want your training goal to be for comp or just lifestyle goals, well, isn't it then? Like I say, if you are training for a comp, you've got to be pushing that pace, probably say 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Like you do need those sort of slower tempo days and those days where you are working on something new, but at the level, no matter what level you're at your level in competition, it typically tends to be the more athletic player will take the edge.
I think the best way that I've heard it described, you know, across the board in any sport is the way that Hickson talks about it in the documentary Choke, and he's talked about it a couple of times on various interviews and stuff, hasn't he? He's like, you know, if I can have my resting heart rate at 50 beats per minute and my opponent's is 65, for every time I push the level up, they're always going to be 15 beats per minute ahead of me.
Yeah.
So like you're spending more in their gas tank than he is, and you can dictate the pace.
Yeah.
Like as you said as well, like if you're just doing it for, you know, casual and lifestyle, and you know you're not really too bothered about competing, yeah, you can have like more flexibility with the intensity of the way that you roll, and I think you're just doing it for enjoyment, and you know yourself and your body, whether you're feeling fit or whether you need to like maybe push the intensity a bit. But for as much as it is good doing cardio outside of the gym, nothing can really replicate doing rolling.
No. Because
there's nothing really that you're doing it under load, and even if you're doing it with weights, it's good, but the weights aren't fighting you back.
No, and it's not constantly shifting weight either. It's
I think one of the best methodologies that I've used or felt like feels like grappling is training with a sandbag.
Yeah.
And you know, not just picking it up and holding it and stuff like that. You can do a lot of stuff on the ground, like having the sandbag on your side and rolling it onto you and then rolling it off. You know, it looks a bit silly, but it's actually really good training for grappling.
Nails as well. Like if you're laying your back and you've got even a 40-kilogram sandbag, like standing up 40 kilograms, it's going to be difficult, but you can lift it and move it around fairly easily. But if you're laying there and you're in a really like biomechanically in bad position, and you're trying to lift something up and over, and then pushing it over, that's gonna take a lot more energy than just if you were stood up, lifting it up and moving it.
And that's why it works so well for grappling, because like you said, grappling, most of the time your opponent's trying to put you in bad biomechanics.
Yeah.
And then you're trying to fight out of those situations. It's never in jiu-jitsu you getting yourself into a perfect bench press position with your shoulders arched back and your feet planted on the floor, and you just bench press your opponent off.
True.
They're smushing your arm up on the side of your head, they're trying to pinch it at your hips, and you're trying to do something from this really squished up position and trying to generate force. There's no, like, what replicates that in the gym?
I mean, if you were on the bench and you were to tie your head to your arm and trying to bench this way, might replicate it. Don't do that, by the way.
I think we should come up with a new training instructor for this year. New year, new me, 2022. That was nothing that beats sandbags. Sandbags are awesome.
I've seen a lot of things about water bags as well, like just because it's a constant, like the water does not stop moving when you're moving it and lifting it around.
Yeah, I've got one of those, like Bulgarian bags, like a water-filled Bulgarian bag. And it is good, and the water doesn't stop moving, but depending on what sort of movements you're doing with it, you can get into the, like it's kind of a centrifuge, isn't it, where all the water goes to the outside of where the bag is, or where the object is away from the centre, and you can kind of, you're not cheat, but like if you're efficient with the movement, you can make the bag work for you rather than fighting against the bag. I think the other thing that is kind of underrated with the sandbags as well, even from the lighter ones like 20 kilos upwards, you can squeeze them, and you can squeeze them against your body, and that inhibits your own breathing, which feels a lot like jiu-jitsu as well. When somebody's got that knee on belly position on you, or you're in a tight side control or crossface or something like that, scaffold, something like that, your breath's being pushed out of you, and that's what sandbags feel most like to me.
Especially if it's like a tightly packed one as well, where like you're trying to make a bit of an indent in it and try and move the sand around with your grip. But if it's tightly packed, you're gonna have to generate some force to get some sort of change in the movement in the sand, and that's just gonna be crushing up onto your chest.
And regardless of what body weight you are, if you can get anywhere close to your own body weight with sandbags, that's gonna be a real tough workout.
Yeah.
Like I've got a 90 kilo one and I've got a 120 kilo one, and they're both horrible. Like, I definitely wouldn't say to spend all of your time there, but like what I'm considering doing is dropping down some of the weight in one of them. So I've got a light one, like 50 kilos or something like that, which is like half my body weight. So I can do a little bit more dynamic movements with it. Because when I bought the 90 kilo one, I was like, I'm going to be able to do like suplex and all this sort of stuff with it, because like it's body weight. I can do that to people in the gym. It doesn't work like that. It's just such a weird dead weight. Really difficult to pick up off the floor. If you look at like, the way that, there's no really any scenario in jiu-jitsu too much, like a little bit in wrestling where you'll kind of interlock your hands around somebody's hips and stand them up off the floor, like a wrestling kind of deadlift. When you get underneath the body and lift from the hips. You don't really do that in jiu-jitsu, do you? All the suplex stuff happens from the hips up. You can drop your hips underneath your opponent and lift from that like biomechanically strong position. So sandbags, anything that you think is going to be like an easy weight around your body weight is really tough, especially if you don't train a lot with conventional weights as well. To put it into perspective, like somebody who could do maybe 200 plus kilos on a deadlift is probably going to struggle, or 100 kilos is going to be challenging for them to do on a sandbag, just because of the awkwardness of the implement.
I think as well with where the weight sits in relation to your centre of gravity. So with a bar, it's over your feet and it's moving in a vertical line, whereas with the sandbag, it's kind of hard to keep it in line over your feet, and once you get it up to your hips, the weight's in front of you. So you're fighting gravity from pulling you forward, so you're having to activate everything in your back to then try and shift it up to your shoulder if you're trying to shoulder it, or even if you're just picking it up, putting it down, picking it up, putting it down. It's just a whole new movement where the muscles that you may be using, say in a deadlift, are going to be used, but in a much more in a maximal way, as opposed to a deadlift where it's the weight stays where you know it's going to be.
I think there's a much more of an element of like you are at your end ranges of movement, with the sandbags, whereas you can put yourself into, again, like a biomechanically strong position with a deadlift with a normal bar or a trap bar, which is probably what I'd recommend most people use in most of the training. But I think sandbags are good for supplementary stuff.
Yeah.
Or if you don't have any equipment available and you can only pick up one thing, I probably don't think a sandbag's a bad shout.
No.
If you're going to train at home at your home and you've got no other kit and you're not going to buy a barbell or anything like that, get a sandbag that you can modify the weight of. You can do a lot with. You can do your deadlifts, you can do squats.
Yeah.
I think Dan Strauss has got a whole instructional on sandbag stuff, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, over lockdown, I was doing like floor pressing with the sandbag, and you've got to get that up onto you, and then you've got to press it, and it's like a bridge as well.
I've seen people doing that with where they make like a water bar as well. So you get seen the homemade one where it's like piece of piping, half filled with water, both ends sealed, and you're pressing. And then you can start to change the height of your hands to make it heavier on one side, and then you go on the other side, and that constant back and forth motion, just a whole different type of workout across your chest and shoulders as well.
Another one that I've seen as well with water that I do fancy doing again is another one that Dan Strauss has done is with the stability ball, the big stability balls that you see in gyms that people most oftentimes are probably sitting on.
Yeah.
Like I use them a lot for neck work, so I use them quite frequently through the week. But I think it like half fills it or 3/4 fills it with water, and it ends up being about 40 or 50 kilos or something like that. And the same idea that you're talking about, the instability of it and the moving, and it's like kind of a nice hybrid. You can be a bit more dynamic with the movement.
Yeah.
A lot more explosive stuff, overhead throws and this and that. But again, they're pretty cheap, like 15 quid for one of those off Amazon.
And they're pretty robust as well, so it's not gonna burst as easily as...
I almost can't believe that they take as much force as they say that they do.
Yeah.
They're rated at like 1,000 kilos or some shit.
Serious?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I'd like to see it on one of those pneumatic presses and see what pressure they actually pop at, because they always say rated at 1,000 kilos. And you'd like to think that they could take at least 300 for what most people are probably going to be doing with them. Like that'd be sufficient, but like 1,000 kilos is pretty significant. I can't imagine any scenario where you're pushing it close to the limit.
I think would be interesting as well. Now you mentioned that the pressure is when they like lift cars up in cranes and drop them.
Yeah.
Sort of like half filling with water, taking it up to a height, and seeing what height it's actually gonna not survive with.
Yeah. Like they did with the the Hilux on. Do you remember when they did the Toyota Hilux on Top Gear?
Yeah.
You tried to kill it basically. How many ways can you kill a stability ball?
Could be a video idea.
Could be a video idea. Sorry, probably. If you've thought about it, you can guarantee that it's pretty much already a video out there. Tell you one thing that Dan Strauss is a big advocate of as well, which I'm also a big advocate of, is grip strength.
Yeah, massively.
Because like it or not, jiu-jitsu, pretty much 90% of it is grip fighting.
Yeah.
Like jiu-jitsu is pretty much grip fighting.
And there's nothing worse than if someone's got hold of your wrist and you can't break that grip.
Yep.
Like, that feeling is just kind of like, I've got to try and play this guy's hand off my hand now. And there are little fancy ways you can do it, but if they've got that proper like dad grip, you aren't getting out of it.
Well, it's like, how can you stack the odds in your favour? The most in jiu-jitsu is do like a 2-on-1 grip.
Yeah.
In any position, whether that's standing or on the ground. Like if you can win that grip battle and you've got the 2-on-1, or you've got like a real strong single arm grip on the wrist, or I can't remember. I think it was that match that I sent you, that gi match where the guy had that strong of a grip that he ripped the sleeve off the gi.
Like, and it wasn't even a battered gi. It looked pretty new, and the sleeve just went. So like anybody who knows how tough gis are, hopefully everyone should know how tough gis are.
If you're listening to this, you probably know how tough a gi is.
I don't see how, especially on a new gi, that would work. And it didn't look like one of those paper thingies. It looked like a well-made, decent thickness gi as well.
Yeah, they're pretty like standard thickness, aren't they? I know you can get lighter weight ones for competition and stuff like that, but they're all well, they're pretty standard thickness, aren't they?
Mm.
You remember when that craze was going around, the people crushing watermelons?
Yeah.
Somebody should do one where they can see if they can rip sleeves off these. I reckon there'd be a lot of damaged fingers off that.
Oh, like just full on knuckles torn off.
Yeah. But it's all like, say, it's all grip fighting, isn't it? You know, like wrist, collar. Even when you're fighting submissions, you know, like rear naked choke, that's a grip fight at the end of the day. So if you've got a good strong grip in jiu-jitsu, it can go a long way to getting you out of some bad situations, or just putting you in a really strong position. If you can just manhandle somebody with a grip, it's really tough for them to fight out and start getting a good position on.
Yeah, and as somebody who's got like really good grips, gonna have good forearms, so it's like the collar ties as well. It transfers over more than just grabbing limbs. You got your collar ties, you got your pins, your crossface is going to be affected. Like even like say finishing the rear naked, like when you latch onto a part of the body, you're gonna have a much stronger base to actually work on.
You ever been gripped by somebody and you're just like, fuck, this is gonna be horrible?
Yeah.
You just know it straight away, don't you? And the worst one, like when it's a big, completely jacked guy and you look like you get a grip and you're like, right, okay, I was kind of expecting that. When it's somebody who weighs about 60 kilos and you grab him and you're like, what the fuck's going on here? We got a lad like that at 12 gauge. First time I rolled with him, he's like quite a tall, skinny guy, and he grabbed me and I was like, where the fucking hell did that come from? I couldn't strip his grip. Like, what the fuck's... And he was a white belt as well, just like...
You speak to afterwards like, oh yeah, I climb 5 days a week. It's like,
yeah,
makes sense.
Climber, like manual labour jobs.
Yeah.
Farm boy strength. There's a legit argument for just doing more manual labour a day to increase your strength. And as well, like another thing that I've been thinking about more and more recently with the popularity of arm wrestling becoming bigger. And like, if you look at the way that a lot of those guys train, there could be a lot of good crossover for grapplers for improving the grip strength, because it's a lot of that collar tie sort of position. And I might start incorporating a little bit of that into my training, to be honest.
Even down to like improving that rotational strength and just the sheer shoulder stability from it. Like, it's gonna help, it should, or it's gonna help improve the health of your shoulders, improve the health of possibly your neck, because the better your shoulders are, your neck improves, and it just has a great trickle-down effect down the body.
Yeah, I think, as well, not just like for grips, like we're talking grip fighting, if you're stronger in that position where you're fighting the rotation, and you can stave off getting that submission snapped on even quicker, you prevent your injury occurring for a longer period of time, aren't you?
Oh, definitely. And hopefully everybody's going into the new year with sort of relatively low injuries. If you're taking that time off around Christmas, everything should have healed a little bit, so kind of coming back you might feel better. If you don't, you'll probably feel better down the line, because like you saying, your back's improving. Yeah,
my back's improving. Like the muscular pain that I had is pretty much healed, and it's all like disc and nerve now, so that'll take its time, but it is improving slowly. It can be frustrating. Like I can't foresee the point when I'm starting to roll again properly. I don't see that happening anytime soon. So I've kind of compartmentalised that in my head a little bit. It's like just kind of put it on the back burner. I'm going to do what I can do. Go in, do what techniques I can do. Go in and watch the class. If I can't do the technique, I'm going to watch the technique, help other people out in the class. It's kind of at that beneficial position where I'm at in my jiu-jitsu career, if you want to call it a career, like practice, that I understand the concepts enough that without necessarily having the opportunity to be able to practice it, that I can understand the concept and then help other people with it as well.
Things like that, it kind of helps when you're watching things like instructionals as well, then, because you'll already have a good understanding of what they're looking to do or what they're trying to achieve, and you're looking for the nuances rather than the full technique in what's being shown. So the same instructional that you might have looked at 10 years ago, you'll watch now, and you'll get completely different information from what you watched, as opposed to being less experienced, and you're like, alright, I just want to know how to do an armbar. And you'll tend to, I used to do it all the time, copy something literally step by step, but I wouldn't have a full understanding of what I was doing it for. It was just being, this works, I got it off this video, and I'm just going to keep doing it until I struggle to not get it.
It's like like at the beginning, you're looking at the big broad picture of it, aren't you? And it's like, right, I'll just grab the arm and I'm pulling it against my hips. It's like, but then when you go back and watch it after 3 years of doing jiu-jitsu, it's like, the pinch of the legs there and the control on the wrist and like the elbow placement, that's what's making it more effective. And you'll just see little things. I remember, I can't remember when we talked about it on here, but a fairly new guy was asking me a white belt. He was like, so you get to like brown belt and black belt, you learn like some secret moves or something like that. It was like, no mate, you just learn the ones that I've just showed you today.
And strip your game back.
There's no secret moves until you get to like red belt, and then you learn the 5-finger death punch. But I was like, no, you just learn the same ones. And he was like, well, you don't get bored doing that. It's like, no, absolutely not. Like I showed you this today. What's the difference between when I did it on you and you felt the pressure of how I did it versus the white belt that you were drilling with? He was like, oh, it was like more pressure and it was tighter. And I was like, well, I didn't just get that on the first time I did it. So you learn it more and more and you pick up little bits and you get better and better at it and you kind of tighten and trim the fat off. And that's how you get better at jiu-jitsu. And then he was like, oh, shit. And then I think he had a bit of a realisation moment that he's not going to get good at jiu-jitsu for a long time. But that's the sad reality of the sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's the fun thing as well, because you're learning like the same shit basically, but you're just getting better and better at it over time through practice.
Well, that's what basically any skilled person does. So if you look at any trade, any sort of anything where you sort of, it's the same thing you're doing, but you just become more efficient at it. You trim the fat, you get a better understanding. So when you are doing things, you might be able to skip the unnecessary steps because you know how to go around them. So like, okay, you show this to beginners because they need everything sort of laid out in front of them. But then when you get to a certain point, you're kind of like going, well, I can bypass that by going to this position here and doing this way, instead of having to do the full sort of long process of setting it up.
Yeah. I watched on like YouTube a video of like people making swords or like axes or any, like a tool or something. They're making a tool. I'm just going to use knives as an example. But like, you look at it and you're like, okay, I can do that. I could make a knife. And you're like, you watch a video and you're like, the basic techniques are there. You're like, I can guarantee my knife would come out looking like a complete piece of shit. It'd look like a knife. But the guy who's been doing it for 10 years, knife is going to look way better.
Yeah.
And I know which one I'd rather buy.
It'll probably be done in a short amount of time as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly the same as jiu-jitsu. It's like, you the thing's the same, but you can tell which one's better immediately. And I can watch anybody do anything, like fucking sand a table or plastering or something like that. When somebody's got a real skill at something that initially appears simple, but they're a master of it. Yeah. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think jiu-jitsu is the perfect example of that.
Oh, massively. And I think as well, like, I can't remember, might have been you that told me this a while back, or might have picked up in another video where when you're watching instructionals, watch it once or twice with the volume up, but then also go back and watch it again with the volume off and really focus on what they're actually doing. How they're moving, hand placements, foot placements, hip placements, and watching it without the noise, because they may not tell you every detail, because a lot of the stuff that you do just because you know it, without realising, oh, put my hand here and move this way. You might just be like, yeah, put the block here and I step out to the side, but if you watch it without the sound, you may see the hips moving in a certain way, which makes a big difference to the movement that you're trying to replicate.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something for somebody who's more advanced. When you're trying to just learn, if it's your first couple of months, just listen to what the instructor's saying. Because I think what a lot of people do when they're teaching, unless they're really good, is like the way that they'll explain something to you verbally is kind of like, not the textbook way that it's been taught to them, but it's kind of the way that they've learned it maybe a little bit of time ago. And obviously in between that time, they've learned some finer details that they've tuned it up. So I always think about, when I'm watching, I always try and watch what the instructor's doing rather than listening to what they're saying necessarily. Because I'll get more detail out of it that way. I'm like looking at where he's putting his hips, like you say, or where his hands are going, or even like the way that he's dropping the pressure, or what specific grip it is, and this and that. Because what they're saying, like it's really hard to communicate what you mean verbally, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's a real skill to be that eloquent in what you're trying to say that you can verbalise it and somebody understands it fully. But it's easier to watch, like if you can see everything that's going on, and even better, like if you're in the class, if you get the opportunity to be the body that the instructor's demoing on, that's even better. We talked about this the other week, I think, because then you can feel that pressure.
Yeah.
Like you might not be able to see everything that's going on, and I think sometimes people like think, oh shit, I'm like being demoed on it, I'm not going to be able to see what's going on from the outside. But it's going to be way better for you to be the person to be demoed on, because you feel it, you feel the pressure.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that when you first learning that you don't see from the outside, is like how it feels. And then you can go back into your training group and be like, no, he was doing this and this is where the pressure was. And that accelerates everybody's learning.
And it's sort of what we call the invisible jiu-jitsu, isn't it?
Yeah.
And another little thing for that as well is if you really aren't grasping the full technique, ask your instructor to do it on you as well. So when he's walking the room, say to, oh, I can't get the right pressure on the getting up here, can you do it on me so I can feel where your weight is, kind of feel where the pressure is, kind of feel how you're isolating that specific part, and then that will help you develop a greater understanding of what's actually being taught.
Yeah. And that's after a little bit of time as well doing jiu-jitsu, that's where you can start looking into doing like privates or something like that as well. You know, if there's something that you really want to finely tune in on, like, you know, the basic details of it, then that's an opportunity to look at doing like one-to-ones or privates with your coach. Because like I think most of the best understanding can be learnt in the class.
Yeah.
Then when you've got one specific area that you want to tune up on, when you've already got a basic understanding of it, then that's a good opportunity to go in. We were talking about this with the online coaching as well the other week, weren't we? Probably best reserved for people who already have a good understanding broadly of the topic, but maybe they don't know the full details in as much depth as the person that they're learning off. And I think that's where that stuff's better utilised.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's one thing as well, like if you don't know what it is you want to improve on, it's kind of hard for the coach to sort of guide you on that improvement.
Yeah.
So like if you are going for like a private, sometimes have an idea of what you want to work on, and just say, oh, I want to work on this specific sequence, or I'm struggling with this submission chain, can we focus on this for it? And then just really take the time to break it down and get those really small details that you're after for it.
I think you should always go to privates with the intention of what you want to learn. Have you ever had you surely must have had either been on the teaching end or in the class, on the receiving end of it, where like there might be only a couple of people in the class and the instructor goes, so, you know, like, what do you guys want to work on tonight? And everyone's like, whoa, I don't know. Like, how do you get better at jiu-jitsu? As a fucking coach, it's like, what the hell am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
Like, I can't do anything with that. It's like, oh, I want to get better at submissions. Like, anything specific? And it's quite hard as well, because I get sometimes people just like rock up to training and it's like, oh, I just want to have the class. I don't really want to think about it too much. But, you know, you should always kind of have something like that in your back pocket, or something that you're working on. It's just about being present in your own practice, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you should have something where if the opportunity does arise, where your instructor says, so is there anything that anybody wants to work on specifically? You're like, yes, definitely. Like wrestler's ride control or whatever it is.
Well, it's like, it's a great way to get through your plateaus, where turning up to training with an objective, and if that question does arise where, quiet class, what is there anything specific that you guys want to look at, you can be like, yeah, well tonight I wanted to look at my Kimura finishes, so and that might be your goal, to get more finishes during the rolling, and your coach can then go through some smaller details on the Kimura that you might have been missing, or It's a great opportunity just to get reps and reps and reps in the drilling aspect of the setup, the grips, the finish, the angles, different ways to finish it, and just sort of giving it from different positions as well. Because I know it's one thing that I do now when I'm rolling is I'll go into a certain role and it may vary person to person, or I might just do the same thing for the whole class of this person's really hard to guillotine. So my objective for the whole round is purely to attack guillotines. You may lose position, you may get caught, you may not get any guillotines, but in that conscious sort of effort in trying to get the guillotine, you are going to get better. You're going to step away from it and come away with, okay, from this position I could have wrapped the head up here and gone for it here, or I had the guillotine here but I couldn't finish it. What did I do wrong? Ask your partner, get feedback, but going in there with objectives, like obviously during your first, like say 12 months, get in, train, learn as much as you can. But once you sort of get into that blue belt level, or after your first year in, go there with objectives. And even if you are in your first 12 months, have different objectives. So you may go in there going, okay, last week I got tapped 10 times during rolling. This week, 9 times. Week after, 8 times. Okay, I'm noticing that I'm getting caught in this submission a lot. Okay, I'm going to go and either ask somebody how to escape it, or how to avoid getting in the position, or even just sort of being like, okay, you caught me with an armbar 3 times in this round. What was I doing to get the armbar? Sometimes it could just be the person is better than you and they're really good at armbars. But other times there may be a really big mistake you're making during the round that's exposing your arm and making you vulnerable to these positions.
Yeah. And if you get a really nice training partner, they'll like let you know that either in the roll or at the end of the roll as well. You know, like if you're obviously trying to work on guillotines or whatever, and the guy goes, you could have like grabbed my neck a little bit more in this way, or your hands weren't really joined together too much like this. The reality is that most people are probably not going to give you a tip on how to finish them better.
No.
You probably have a handful of good training partners. The more you end up training, that like they'll try and help you out, and because of course you'll do the same for them as well. But it's like building that trust, isn't it? And knowing that getting your training partners better gets everybody else better as well.
Oh, definitely.
And gets you better at the end of the day. As much of a selfish pursuit as that is, the better your training partners are on the mat, the better you're going to be in jiu-jitsu.
And it's just playing a long game with it.
Yeah.
So, like I say, the room gets better, you get better, and then as a byproduct of that, the room gets better again, and you get better again. It's just ongoing cycle.
Going back to what you said, what do you think about like in the beginning of your jiu-jitsu practice, asking too much questions at the beginning? Like sometimes you get somebody who comes along who's like just asks a lot of questions, where sometimes you feel like they could have maybe paid a little bit more attention to what was going on and had a go at it and figured out the problem themselves. So I guess, do you want to be more trying to problem solve yourself like 80% of the time and then asking questions, or if you've got a question, you're just going to ask it straight away?
I think that depends person to person. Sometimes like a lot of the questions could come from like nervousness. So if it's we've probably both experienced it, where you have questions which are genuine and you have some questions where it's kind of like it comes from somewhere else, whether it's a fear of applying the submission too much, or a fear of being on the receiving end of the submission that you're drilling. So I think once you determine that, I'd probably say in the earlier years it's worth being probably 50-50, but then as you progress through your sort of experience and that level and knowledge, that should slowly drift down towards about 90-10. Kind of like the school system. So when you're in primary school, everything gets spoon-fed to you. Go to high school, it's okay, you got homework to research this, but we're going to teach you what you need to know. Get to college, it's a little bit more homework. Get to university, and it's probably 15-20% taught. But the rest of it's all on you.
Yeah. I think my only thing that I'd add to that is like sometimes in a class somebody will ask a question and the answer that they want could just have been achieved by them having a go at the thing that you were doing.
Oh yeah.
You know, don't ask a question too early sometimes. I think would just be my input is like have a quick go at it, and then if you're not getting it, or if there's something immediately obvious when the instructor's showing the technique, then you ask a question. But sometimes it can be best resolved by just having a go at it, and then if you're not getting it, stick your hand up and then ask what you were going to ask then, or you know, you might answer your own question by doing it.
Yeah.
Or you might get a different question altogether. Like I said, well, that question that I had originally wasn't really that important, but now I can't get this, so I've got another question. But yeah, definitely like the more you know, sometimes the less you have to ask questions because you can figure it out yourself. But then on the other hand as well, like the more you know, the more like not educated you can be with the question that you're going to ask is to the instructor.
Yeah, I get what you say. So like you can be more specific and
specificity.
You know what you're asking. Whereas if you're less experienced, you kind of just trying to develop some sort of understanding.
Yeah. Sometimes you get a question like, you know, you're showing a armbar and you're like, yeah, well, what if I sit up and grab his neck? It's like, well, that's not what we're doing right now. It's kind of irrelevant to the topic. But like, you know, a better question, a more specific one would be, how can I grab the wrist in a certain position or something like that. You know, like you said, you become more specific with and knowledgeable about the way that you want to ask the questions, not just random.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I say, if you have any issues with plateaus in your game, drop a comment below what it is, and if any of the tips that we've put in here have helped you get through it, let us know. Or if you have any other tips for plateaus, put them in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts on what we spoke about today, and let us know what your goals are for this year as well. We've not really gone into ours, but it's good to see what everyone's sort of goal setting. I think both of ours will probably be get training again and stay injury free at the moment.
Yeah, pretty much. Stay injury free and get better at jiu-jitsu. My first question back is going to be to my instructor, how can I get better at jiu-jitsu? Shut up, get out of there.
Well, make sure you hit us up on all the social medias at the Grapplers Academy, got the Bonafide PT, coached by Si. Make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit that little notification bell as well next to the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on any of our content. And drop us a comment below and we'll see you next week.